Animal Well is a Metroidvania. Metroidbrania. Or as Billy Basso himself would say.
I think Metroidbrania sounds kind of stupid, but I don't have a better name for it, so. Metroidvanias also sounds kind of stupid. I think genres are stupid in general, so I don't really have a strong opinion about it, so just say what you will say.
Type game. The game starts off with a mostly dark screen. All you see is a bulb and a prompt that says, press A to awaken. You wake up and see a squirrel sitting on the right side of the screen. So, naturally, you chase it. Upon chasing it to the next screen over, it has disappeared, and your next inclination is to follow the path forward. Upon reaching the next screen, you are greeted with a pleasant ambience and see a telephone. You now learn this is a save point. You see the pesky squirrel again, so you try to pay him back for getting away last time. However, he flees to the screen to the right. You follow him post-haste. However, upon following the squirrel, you are not met with a furry foe. You are met with a evil blue. Your first inclination upon seeing this enemy is to run, but after you've mustered up some courage, you are able to approach the demonic entity and die. Fear not, you have respawned at the phone and have learned from your mistakes. You approach the evil blue again and are able to slip by it. You move forward to a room with a button. You press the button and you see one of 3 orbs light up on the gate below. You see a button across the pond. However, you cannot reach with your normal jump, so you turn the crank. A platform appears. You jump on the platform. Hit the button. Now you have 2 out of 3 orbs. But now you have nowhere left to go. You notice something out of the corner of your eye. A secret path. You go through the secret path and then are rewarded with the final button. The gate is open. You go through the gate and in there are some fireworks. You don't know what they do, so you throw one and are pleasantly surprised. You notice that you are unable to return from where you came from, so you continue forward and encounter another evil blue. With no option other than run or die, you throw a firework in desperation, and the evil blue is vanquished. With this newfound knowledge, you return to the other evil blue that was blocking your path earlier. You throw the firecracker, turn the crank to ascend, and now you are victorious. Okay, so you may be wondering why I'm rambling like an insane person about these seemingly inane actions. The reason is because if you hold up a lens to this, then you realize that the game tricked you into playing through a tutorial sequence. Chasing the squirrel is a movement tutorial. The save point directly before your first enemy is a way to let you know that death is a thing, and that there are enemies that you will have to avoid. The way you get to each button within the gate room, the firecrackers leading back to the evil blue, they are all tutorials that convey a simple gameplay mechanic to you through player-led experimentation. The thing that is so brilliant about this style of tutorial is that it teaches you mechanics, sets the general gameplay tone, and it also guides you along the thought process that the developer intends without shoving it down your throat. This allows the developer to build more and more intuitive mechanics and leads to a better player experience overall. This is what I consider the type of tutorials that all games should strive for. Now, on to the other side of gaming tutorials, the dark side, something I like to call the tutorial pop-up plague. It's the weird occurrence that happens in a lot of newer games where every single time you do an action in the game, a tutorial menu pops up related to the current situation or not, completely interrupting gameplay and disrupting the flow of your game. This may not seem like a big deal, and you may be thinking, how else would a game explain complex mechanics? Or, of course, there's tutorials. Once upon a time, I may have thought that exact same thing. That is until I played a certain game called Monster Hunter Rise. You start off in Monster Hunter Rise creating a character. Driven by creative whimsy, you add epic personalized features. You give your character, your dog, and your cat a fitting name and set off on your adventure. Instantly, you are met with a 5-minute cutscene. I skipped this. After the cutscene, you go through some dialogue, and already there's a pop-up. Surely, if it's popping up this early, it must be extremely important and urgent. Tutorial explains that the left stick is used to move around. Cool. The game now wants me to talk to the merchant, so I quickly chat with the merchant, and another pop-up. This one must be really important too. Right stick to move the camera. Nice. Thank you. Surely, now that this is out of the way, I can move forward and play the game. Wrong. Let's take a guess at how many pop-ups appear within this first stretch of gameplay. 9 tutorial pop-ups, one being 6 pages long, totaling 25 pages of tutorial screens to read within the first 10 minutes of gameplay. After you get through those tutorials, you would think that there are no more pop-ups the rest of the game. Wrong again. These tutorial pop-ups are consistent all the way to the end of the game. In theory, this style of tutorialization allows for more complex mechanics to be conveyed to the player explicitly so that they can fully comprehend them. This is useful in a game like Monster Hunter, where there are extremely fundamental mechanics that we'll use throughout the entire game that are not intuitive, i.e. weapon combos, gear building, and how affinity gems work. However, the game doesn't just have tutorials for these, it has a tutorial for every single mechanic, no matter how minute. And it is never just a control flashed on the screen for 1 or 2 seconds. It is always a pop-up that completely interrupts your gameplay. Now, this is extremely annoying, and overall this style of tutorialization expresses developer intent for how they would like you to interact with mechanics in an absolute literal way, but what this leads to is the intent is not exactly intuitively picked up on by the player. In my eyes, if I were a new Monster Hunter player, and I once was at one time, after experiencing this opening sequence, I would be in one of 3 types of mindsets regarding how I would interact with the rest of the game. Mindset type A, you are okay with these tutorials and the gameplay interruptions, and read every single tutorial fully. Take all this info to heart and love the game. Mindset type B, you are overwhelmed by the info, are severely off-put, and on shaky grounds already starting the game. In mindset C, people like me, you saw how useless the first tutorial pop-ups were, and consequently instantly skipped through all the tutorials from here on out, useless or not. You still played the game fine by Googling any questions you had, but none of the tutorializations or any of the mechanics were learned via the game. These 3 experiences have their own unique issues. Player A goes through the game, has fun, but they have already most likely played another Monster Hunter game. That other game's experience lends itself to the current playthrough, and they go through the game fine. Additionally, these sorts of gamers are of a certain elite caliber. I often find that they chastise newer players for having valid concerns about problematic mechanics, under the guise of, that's just how it's always been, or get good. We've all heard this. The problem with player mindset B is that the game experience is already tainted slightly for them in some way. They have a chance at becoming like player A, but due to the mentioned overwhelmingness of it all, are way more likely going to quit, or if they do choose to continue to play the game, will turn into player type C. The issue with player C's mindset is that they are inherently going against developer intention. This is not all bad, as you are still able to play through the game, have fun with all the mechanics, but this playthrough will most likely involve you Googling builds, weapon guides, or things like, how do I host a multiplayer mission, Monster Hunter Rise? So on one side of the tutorial continuum, you have games like Animal Well that have no explicit tutorials, intuitive mechanics, no gameplay interruptions, and just generally allow the player to interact with and learn mechanics at their own pace. And on the other side of the continuum, you have games like Monster Hunter Rise that forces tutorials for every mechanic, no matter how important. They happen very often and handholds the players through the learning of each mechanic. But what if I told you that there was a game that bridges the gap between both of these styles, still feels intuitive, fresh, doesn't require preceding knowledge, and is not overwhelming? The mythical game that I'm talking about is CrossCode. CrossCode is an extremely underrated indie gem that was developed and released by Radical Fish Games in 2018. The setting takes place in the future within a Sword Art Online type MMO that can be accessed via a Neuralink-like gaming device. CrossCode's fundamental mechanic that it uses for every single function in the game is balls. Your character shoots balls that reflect off of surfaces, hits enemies with balls. NPCs even joke about balls with their friends. This is seriously the core concept of the game. While this may not seem complex at first, it soon becomes clear that this has a lot of depth.
As the ball mechanic is complex in nature, it requires tutorialization. The difference between how CrossCode approaches this and how Monster Hunter Rise approaches this is that in CrossCode, when you are going through a movement tutorial, it's because you are initializing your avatar within the in-game world after just spawning in. When you're learning how accuracy and throwing balls works, it's being told to you by the headstrong captain of a vessel that is sailing around the planet where the in-universe MMO takes place. Do you see the difference here? Instead of CrossCode having a virus pop up that explains a mechanic that is loosely related to your current action, it approaches the tutorial as a necessary evil, but tries its hardest to make it fun. On top of this, CrossCode stays away from text tutorials as much as possible. Despite that fact, the game has no problem conveying extremely complex mechanics to you on the regular. The best place to demonstrate this in the game is the game's major dungeons. Now, this is a spoiler warning. If you are intrigued by CrossCode in any way possible, go play it and close out of this video, as I will be spoiling a portion of the first major dungeon of the game. Alright. After already learning that balls can ricochet and activate switches throughout various experiences in the game so far, you feel prepared to enter the first dungeon available to the player, Bergen Mines. You enter the first available room in the dungeon. You see a hole that fits the shape of a pillar, and nearby there is another pillar already under the ground. Next to the hole, you see that there is a switch that can be hit with a ball. If only you could access the high ground nearby. After fiddling around for a bit, you push the pillar in the hole. After the pillar is in the hole, you can now hop up on the terrain, hit the switch, open the door. So, what did this teach us so far? If the pillars are movable, they go in the ground, and you're going to have to use them to access switches. With this knowledge retained, we move on to the next room. The next room introduces a new puzzle mechanic, the ball arrows. These arrows push your balls in whichever direction they are facing. In that same room, you see some angled panels that, upon hitting with your balls, reflect them. You combine the panels with the ball arrows to have your ball hit the switch. At this moment in the dungeon, you have already been tutorialized on the core mechanics that will be at play for most of the rest of it. So, obviously, your next room looks like this. Although there is the initial overwhelming shock of seeing the room, you understand every core concept that will be required to reach the solution. So, you naturally start testing, and with each test you get a better fundamental idea of how the mechanics work and their limitations, and eventually you hit the switch, solve the puzzle, and move on to the next room. This gameplay loop is near flawless in my mind, as it allows for the game to convey complex mechanics to you while still allowing you to have those aha moments. What this also allows is for the developers to completely take the training wheels off, and ramp the difficulty of the dungeon the further you go along, eventually leading to a magnum opus puzzle. This is a glimpse into that puzzle for the Bergen Mines. So yeah, it's a hard game. So, what CrossCode teaches us is that forced tutorials are not all bad. It is all about the context through which they are conveyed. For example, abruptly stopping the player minute 1 of gameplay and telling them the left stick is how you move may not be the best use of player time. On the contrary, naturally stopping the player through in-universe context to explain a core mechanic is good. And in the end, I'm just sharing an opinion I had about tutorials that was inspired by the genius design of 2 indie games. So, if you like the sound of Animal Well or CrossCode, then I urge you to check them out, especially CrossCode, as this game has seemingly gone under the radar, even though it is near perfect. And right now is the perfect time to get into the game, as the developers are currently working on the spiritual successor named Alabaster Dawn, so please be sure to follow that development if you are interested. If you have already played those games and are looking for games with similar tutorial styles, here are a couple: Don't Starve, Outer Wilds, Return of Obra Dinn, Disco Elysium, The Long Dark, and Pathologic 2. So, if you made it this far in the video, then I'm actually beyond flattered that you would sit through the entirety of something that I created, and I wish I had more videos for you at this time to watch, but this is my first one. If you want to help me out tremendously, then please like and subscribe. This will also allow you to look out for any future uploads that I made. Thanks for watching. Love you.